So, welcome to our inaugural event of Silver Service at the Cattle Show. Today, I am joined by none other than Lance Sapera, a man I've worked with for many years. I think it's nearly 4 years, right, Lance?
Yeah.
So, welcome to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about trying to unpack and unload everything around TA, give people some insights into what is happening in the world of TA right now. What are the challenges that TA is facing, and how we can try and overcome those, and how you, as individuals searching for a role, how you can maybe sort of navigate those as well. So, super excited to have the conversation with Lance. Lance, why don't you kick us off, give us a bit of an introduction?
Well, John, yeah, it has been 4 years now, and I'm excited to talk with you about this. I know you and I are both passionate, and we get excited, and we could end up going all day. The listeners
Definitely.
probably don't want us to, but I'm also excited you're doing this because your passion for this topic and for people in general, I think is one of those things that helps carry forward this vision and idea you have, and why we worked so well together.
Yeah, agreed. So tell us a little bit about your credentials, your backstory, how you've ended up, where you've achieved, and give us a little bit of a background on who Lance is.
Again, we don't want to bore the listeners, but the short version of my story is that um, I've had the amazing opportunity to be part of a number of organizations in different industries at different times where they all were going through transformative um, events. And I happened to be part of the teams when that happened. The US Navy, when the Cold War ended, and the United States and the world moved from that Cold War to the global war on terrorism, and it changed everything: how we trained, how we fought, the countries we partnered with, how we partnered globally, how we trained our people, the kind of people we needed. And then after I left active duty, I was with a fitness company that wanted to reinvent selling and make it exciting and make it customer focused. I was part of the RPO team at Intuit, and Intuit at the time went from a siloed desktop company to a cloud company with a SaaS mindset and a platform. And that just completely changed how recruiting supported the business, parted with the business, the kind of people we needed to help hire. And then at Symantec, the same thing was going on in the cyberspace, moving from on-prem to the cloud and all those challenges. And then most recently, together with you and the amazing team we had at Talend, in the data space, again, on-prem to the cloud, but everybody understands just the importance of data now and protecting it and using it to have insights. So all those transformative times just provided amazing learning opportunities and opportunities to contribute to moving the business forward.
Agreed. I don't want to touch on this too much, but one thing you just mentioned there about the data side of what we did at Talent. I mean, I think looking at the way the market is right now, data seems such a key element in terms of, candidate experience. I know you and I will probably talk about that at some point during our conversation today. How we looked at the metrics of the funnel and how we supplied that information to the different parts of the business through building, hiring committees and just sort of bringing the whole organization on board with that, I think was super exciting. I think we were taking that data point and looking at different parts that a lot of companies just weren't looking at, and necessarily maybe not looking at in the wrong area, but I think looking at the funnel in a slightly different way, I think was exciting for sure.
You're absolutely right.
So I guess sort of, to kick off the question points, I don't want this necessarily to be a Q&A sort of perspective. I know you and I have had many conversations. We've said so many times, I wish I'd recorded that because it would have been amazing. So yeah, I think continuing on that sort of perspective, I mean, what are you seeing going on in the marketplace right now? I mean, when we look at not only the tech space, but global sort of TA market, we're seeing increased applications across roles. We're seeing companies dive in on the candidate experience, seeing them jump in on employer branding. What are your sort of key thoughts from the market right now?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think you're right. It can take us in a any multiple of paths. The fact that you only touched on a couple of things there, I think
Mm,
highlights one of the big challenges that all businesses have, and in particular, recruiting, is there is so much to do. There's so much activity, there's so much noise, there's so many tools. There's just so much to do that it starts with prioritization. You have to know what are the few things that if you get them right, they start to create bandwidth to do some more of the things that you have to do to be a real partner with the business. You mentioned the importance of data. That was always one of our top two or three priorities because we knew the business is metrics driven. And so to be a partner to the business, we needed to, with them, identify the top processes and procedures and put a metric to them that helped them see the support we were providing, but also showed the value, the ROI. The
yeah.
idea of, you mentioned candidate experience, the fact that we were measuring that and not just measuring it and then holding it. We worked with, gosh, our TA operations team, but our HRIS team, our IT team, the C suite, and all their business leaders to create a world where not only did we have this data and we were measuring it, but we were sharing it real time for people who wanted to go in. They could click into tools and see it. But we were transparent and we were also providing insights. And so that combination of what we were doing with the data and sharing it helped us strengthen and build partnerships. I think the candidate experience one is a perfect example.
Mm,
We were measuring what the candidates thought about their experience with the recruiters. Did the recruiter keep me updated and aligned? Did they give me, did they get back to me? So I always knew what was going on. But we also measured some key things about the business, like did I get feedback? And the fact that that score for us was never at the net promoter level, which was a benchmark goal for us and for the company, helped us go to the business and say,
mm,
here's what candidates are saying. And oh, by the way, we're blowing the business's hiring goals out of the water.
yeah.
So we were achieving the goal, but here's what candidates were telling us. Particularly, we only surveyed candidates who didn't get the role. And like a sales organization, we wanted to nurture some of those really outstanding people. And when we could go to the business and say, candidates are saying they're not getting quality feedback,
Mm,
that helped us build a partnership with the business. Hiring managers started improving, give the recruiter something meaningful to go back to the candidate with, even if it's a no.
yeah.
And that, just as I get on a roll here, the that created the basis for the training because the
Yeah.
business said, well, I understand the importance of feedback. How can I do this better? What can
Mm,
we do? And so we were creating a training program for the hiring managers that we had piloted with them and then
yeah.
eventually the interview team. So it just, by having a data point in that case that the business understood, they thought was important, and then
Mm,
what we were doing with it, I think it's just part of prioritizing a few things that can
yeah.
lift the entire organization.
Well, I think what was interesting with the candidate side, when we did the survey, when we were deciding, right, who do we survey? I know we were limited sort of tool wise on the fact that we could only have one survey, and it was like trying to figure out, right, who's the catch 'em that we really want to figure out. I mean, I think a lot of companies need to look at this idea of it's not about what your people that you hire, although yes, they should be given exactly the same experience as everyone else, and you would hope that the fact they've joined, they had a good experience. But I think what matters is those people that you didn't hire, like how was their experience? Because that's your point where you're going to get a very honest answer. And I think through, trawling through that data, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, we as a company, we really dug into every bit of feedback. I think a lot of companies send out feedback forms and you just don't know whether it really gets listened to. And okay, it was all anonymized, so you didn't know who it was, but so people maybe didn't realize that we were passionate about putting actions into the way we could differentiate that. And I think that was one of the key elements that became that differentiator, becoming net promoters within the business. I think when we started, when I first sort of kicked off that, and it was like we looked at the data that even the small sort of slither of people that we were surveying at the time, it was pretty low, and it was like, okay, but we can take that information and actually really build on that and build something special. And I think, when we started to say, right, let's actually, let's survey everybody we decline. If they've gone through a conversation with us more than once, then let's really sort of dig into it. I think, pulling back into how, when you look at a company, when you're sort of looking for a new role, or looking, out into the marketplace, what are things that you look for? What's the, as somebody who's a TA professional, how would you navigate, is this the right company for me? Even maybe if we take it before the interview process. Now, we talked a little bit about that when we were at Talent, about, right, how do we, that touch point isn't the interview. It isn't even the application. It's actually the information that people can see. But what do you look for when you look at a company? How do you try and find that gem that you really want to join?
Boy, how much time do we have today? That I think hits on another important part for a TA organization is not just the brand, but what's the hook? Why join? And when you can do, or I think in this day and age, you have to do a good job of telling your story in a way that's compelling, that very talented people who have choices about where to bring their best self to, um, you need to give them something, that they want to be part of something. I think is one of the things you and I have always
Yeah,
been excited about,
the
is
purpose, right?
purpose.
Yeah,
Exactly. And so telling that story in a way that aligns with your company, um, I think is important. And one of the things, coming back to candidate experience, that people could go on websites comparably, they can go on Glassdoor, they can go on our own site and see some great segments from people. It was, what are people saying about their experience? And another question we asked in our surveys that really helped us improve our ability to attract and hire terrific people, but also, again, strengthening the partnership with the business, was we asked people, were you able to tell your story? Were you
yeah.
able to be your authentic self? And that also had some associations with the importance of DEIB for us. And so
Mm-hmm.
the idea that that actually was our highest score is that in the interview process, as people talked with the hiring manager and members of the interview team, and oftentimes people who they would work cross functionally with in other parts of the business, they had a chance to say, I'm Lance, and here's my story. And how does it align with what you're looking for?
Mm-hmm.
And that second piece is because we were committed to nurturing people we met in the process. Um, our recruiters and hiring managers and interview team members they were really active listeners. And when you heard something that made you think, boy, that person belongs at Talent, even if it's not right now in this
Mm,
role. John, we really want to stay in touch with you. And so I think that piece of telling that story in a way, and so the fact that we shared that we're interested in long-term conversations. And so if you love where you're at now, that's great.
mm,
Or for a Talendian who the next right role for them was at another company, we stayed in touch with them because our thought was, how great would it be? So and so goes off to another company for 2 or 3 years, or maybe two companies,
yeah.
and think about all the things they learn in those roles at those companies with their cultures and businesses. And then they come back to us,
Hmm.
share that with us. So that whole piece of telling that story in a way where as someone starts to engage with us, they realize it's not, gosh, I get one chance with this recruiter in this interview, or it's done. That
Yeah, yeah.
wasn't the case for us.
No. I think one of the things with the nurture side of things, I mean, building, I've been thinking a lot about this recently about, I see companies talking about talent pipelining, talent benchmarking, keeping candidates warm, and all this, these types of very sort of sales language, which, I know I've always said that recruitment is probably closer to sales than it is really to any other part of the business, although it is sort of shifting to a more sales marketing approach. The reality there is the language needs to shift in the marketplace as well to more like talent communities. And I think, companies that utilize this, I mean, I've looked at various companies that sort of say, hey, join our talent community. And it's like, well, I it kind of makes me think of like, well, how could we be better? How could we have been better doing, more with our talent communities, making them aware of what it actually means, because you don't know whether you just float into this pot and then you're just sat there. And it's like, I mean, we took time to educate the business in terms of helping them understand, right, this is why a talent community is so important. Just because you had somebody go to the final round and you decline them based on somebody else doesn't necessarily mean that person is not good. Or you wouldn't hire that person in the future. I think, we had a great example of an SDR in Germany, I think it was, where that role traditionally, I think in the past had taken like 180 days to fill on average because of the language and the skill set that we were looking for was just so difficult. And then one of our recruiters reached out to somebody and was like, "Oh, you're part of our talent community. Hey, are you still open? Would you be interested?" It's like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And then 2.5 hours, you've made an offer on a role that would normally take you 180 days to fill. It's insane when you think about that. And I think, that's again when things are quiet from a marketplace, getting recruiters, but also getting candidates in the marketplace, people who are hunting for roles. And actually even those passive people. I mean, if you're not looking for a role, doesn't necessarily mean you can't have conversations with companies that you find interesting. I think, we instilled in the recruiters that it was a case of, hey, you don't need to have a role to reach out to somebody who's interesting. If you know you consistently hire for those roles, build a relationship with that person. I think it goes on the flip side with people who are hunting for roles, right? If you have a company that you aspire to, or somebody that you know in that organization that you appreciate and you would love to work with again, there's no damage done in just reaching out and saying, hey, I want to understand. I'd love to be on your radar of if something were to crop up, to let me know, right? So,
Yeah, that that space is so ripe
mm,
for doing better in. And as that example you gave, I remember it because it was a celebration, and it was a celebration with the business because that candidate had had a really good experience with the
mm,
interview team. And so
yeah,
talent was still in their mind. They were watching. And so, to your point, the opportunity to learn about a company. Are they who you thought they were? Back to your original part
mm,
of this question, what are we looking for? Are they really aligned to the values that they put on their company website? Is the mission really what they're working on. I mean, those kind of things you start
Yeah.
to assess as you talk to people in the company. And then again, coming back to the data piece for us was we actually set a company goal or company goals with the business that made sense. We talked about hiring internal people first. And we said that needs to be 25% of who we hire because we're going to take advantage of people's passion for the company, their interest in learning, their delivering in their current role and promote them or send them, cross-functionally to a new business to stretch themselves. And then we had referrals because we
Mm.
trust our team members to be that first filter for us because
Yeah.
it's, and you and I have talked about this, you can feel pretty arrogant to think that in our interview process, I can learn enough about John in a few conversations to know if they're going to be a great fit for
Mm.
us and lift the company. And the same thing for the candidate joining that two-way street. But boy, you add in a filter of somebody who you know and respect, and they say, talk to John. It's like,
Mm.
holy moly, thank you. We are
Yeah.
steps ahead in what we know. And then that third piece that we added, which was, and that should be a third of our hires, we added in nurture. And it's not just the silver medalist, which most people get. You had budget for one and you found two great people. That
Yep.
happens. So you certainly go as soon as you can and get that, the silver medalist. But the other piece for us was people who we had spoken to, and maybe at the first conversation, they opted out because the role wasn't big enough for them. They wanted
Mm.
to go from, manager to senior manager, and that wasn't this role. But that idea of nurtured candidates took us to a point where for us, what was it? If you do the math, that's
Mm.
65, 66%. So
Yeah.
two out of every three roles, the business understood this. We were hiring people that we knew, we
Mm.
had a relationship with, and they knew us. When one in, for 25% of your roles, or, one in three, when you're starting at ground zero, it's a lot. Um, Easy is not the right word. It's a lighter lift
Mm.
when you're not starting at square one with everybody you have to hire.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it gives the recruiters, it gives the business the ability to actually focus on a candidate experience, which I think is one of the issues that the industry is facing right now. I mean, as much as I've loved in the past things like easy apply. I mean, you look at it now, you look at the marketplace and roles that I think when people talk about job postings, and again, this is we will run out of time, so we will never be able to talk about job descriptions versus job postings, the menu versus recipe sort of point that I've talked about in the past. But really this idea of the issue was, what was it, like 2 years time when we were talking about um oh, we don't have enough candidates applying. We talk about the swathe of the marketplace of, is it a candidate driven market? Is it a client driven market, or an employer sort of driven market? And the reality is now, I think in the last 2 years or the last year, probably, it's shifted so aggressively between the two. It's kind of this messy melting pot of its employer and employee. And that creates, the two positives have almost created a negative sort of impact in the space of, there's so much talent out there on the market. And I think it's, how do you get your CV noticed? How do you get your LinkedIn profile, to be at the top of the searches? And I think that's one of the struggles a lot of people are facing, but as individuals searching for a job. But it's also an issue from the employer's side, because as the name of the show goes, it's, everyone wants to go into this industry. People don't go into recruitment or TA saying, hey, I want to give a really bad experience to people. Like, I want to really mess with people's careers here. What they go in because, they may fall into it, but nobody wants to give a bad service, right? So I think you're trying to offer the best silver service you can do, but when there's this implosion of candidates and roles and this messy melting pot, it really gets difficult to kind of focus on the importance part. And I think that's why the industry is focusing so heavy on candidate experience right now. And hopefully that'll shift in the next couple of months to actually being a reality for a lot of companies.
Yeah, we didn't, because we jumped right into it. We didn't talk
Yeah.
about the title, but you're right. That whole silver service at a cattle show, it paints a picture.
Mm,
And you're right, with all the noise, both on the business side and the candidate searching side, um, wading through that, finding a clear signal is really hard.
mm,
And that's where I think that's another example of what we were doing at Talend is the alignment between the business and the whole people team. In this case, specifically the recruiting team was about providing a great experience
yeah.
because we wanted to be able to start to build that community. And the best way to do that is for the recruiter one on one with this candidate to start by listening. What is John looking for in this role?
Mm,
Instead of, I've got the job and I'm going to put you into
yeah.
this hole. And if you don't fit, we're done. It
Mm,
always started with listening, regardless. And I think candidates appreciated that, just like they appreciated hiring managers starting that way. And going back to the referral piece, that their first recruiter was the person who's referring
mm,
them,
yeah.
listening and understanding what John's looking for to join a purpose driven organization that's striving to live by its values. Um, how cool is that? And
Mm,
then when the recruiter paints a similar picture, so to your point, the opportunity that you have with every conversation to start to build trust, have somebody say, man, that recruiter at insert name of company, I would love to talk to
yeah.
them again. You start to build that relationship. And so, guess what? The next time there's an active campaign for a role and the LinkedIn emails go out or the texts or however you're going to reach out to the candidates, guess what?
Mm,
They're going to respond as opposed to the multiple ones most people get every day in um, their LinkedIn mailbox. That's, I don't know who that is. I don't know that. It's like, oh my gosh, I know them. And so it's
yeah,
that
yeah.
relational piece. And, that takes a commitment from recruiters. It takes a commitment from the business to, which we always had. Um, our recruiters, they certainly didn't have light rec loads, but they weren't overwhelmed
Mm,
so that they had bandwidth to make sure you better call that candidate back to
yeah.
tell them what's going on in their role or the hiring manager's going in a different direction. But you better also be calling the hiring manager
Mm,
to talk to them about what's going on with pipeline and candidates. And
yeah.
you know what? I just can't get John interested. And it's like,
Mm,
well, the person who referred them might be able to, all those kind of pieces that it starts to become a company imperative as opposed to just the recruiter. And
mm,
that's when you're starting to, I think, really do something special.
yeah. I think that will probably be one of my key takeaways actually from just this 30 minutes. I mean, it is all about the communication throughout the process. It's not only just the communication between the recruiter and a candidate or the candidate to the recruiter. It's also the communication with the recruiter and the hiring manager to recruiter. It's and the team involved in the interview process. And it's not just about feedback. It's about before the role opens. It's about there's so many different points there that just if we just talk and have open dialogue, and I think hiring managers need to kind of understand the importance of what TA and the data and the market intelligence that TA brings to it. Recruiters need to understand the importance of how they get that data, which is from speaking to candidates out in the marketplace. And the same, candidates getting information from recruiters and hiring managers in terms of, don't be afraid to interview the person that is interviewing you. So it's a two-way street. It can't just be, and that should be a major red flag if it's just like question, 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 question. And even if at the end it's like, hey, have you got any questions? we've talked about it before in terms of this competency-based conversation rather than just a competency-based Q&A. I mean, it's like, especially moving to what seems to be the shift to a skills-based hiring process of like, let's just not look for those people with the experience, but let's look for people who have transferable skills into that role as well. And I think if you can find that, with an employer, and like you say, I mean, it's very difficult to tell that from a candidate's perspective over 2 or 3 interviews. But more than 2 or 3 interviews doesn't help give you any more information either anyway. So it kind of becomes a moot point. I think there was the Google study that was like anything past a third interview, the decision was no better than a coin toss at the end of the day anyway. So the reality of getting better and smarter at interviewing to actually utilize both, everybody's time more effectively, I think becomes probably a key point.
It absolutely does. You're describing for me the everybody knows that you're not just your CV. You're
Yeah.
not just your LinkedIn profile. You're not just what I learned in a conversation. It's pulling that together to get this holistic, more rounded, more complete view of people so that you can both make a better decision
Mm.
about every time I talk to that team, the problems they're solving, I find myself wanting to jump in and help. Or
Yeah, yeah.
on the other side, it's like, I thought this company would be great, but you're bored in the interview because
Mm.
they are not doing anything compelling. I mean,
No,
that's all part of this. So you're
comes
right
back to
on.
purpose.
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
we're very quickly running out of time, so I know we'll have you back on again. I have no doubt that you and I have hours long of conversations to sort of share with people. Hopefully, in future we can get a couple of people together as well, to share different thoughts and ideas as well. So I just want to wish you a very fantastic day. I know it's early morning there for you, so appreciate it. And thank you very much for sharing your insights and thoughts today. And I look forward to having you on again soon.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's always fun to spend time with you.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
All right, you too.